I used to think all Muslims were terrorists. 3 years ago, I became a Muslim. I'm 38, white, and from the United States. And in this video, I'll cover what changed my mind about Islam, the hardest part about converting, and what I believe now about Islam that I didn't before. 7 years ago, I went through a horrible, devastating divorce 6 months after my son was born. At the time, I had a very successful business, and so I did have money, but I was extremely unhappy because the divorce just completely wrecked me. I believe that God sometimes gives you things like money to test you, to see what you do with it. And I obviously failed. About 4 years, I was living what most men would consider the dream life. You know, I had parties, I had women, I had all of these things that men dream of, at least in America. But I wasn't happy. Every night I would go home and I would just wish that I had my family. I would feel this emptiness in my chest after, 7, 8, 9 hours of having fun. I would just not be happy. And I knew that at the end of the day, something was missing in here. I did not think I could get any more depressed until the day it happened. I noticed that my ex-wife suddenly had this sense of peace, and she just seemed happy. And so I asked her, I said, what's going on? Like, what are you doing? And she tells me, well, I decided to convert to Islam. Now, full stop. You have to understand that I'm American. And in America, we are programmed to hate Muslims. Every TV show, every movie, every time you see a Muslim, you see an AK-47, Allah Akbar, just paints a horrible picture. And so, of course, I hated Islam. I hated Muslims. I thought they were all terrorists. And so when she told me this, I was devastated. And I immediately, I'll be honest, I became aggressive. I said, don't you dare teach our son that stuff. I threatened to take her to court. I was going to spend every penny I had to try to take my child back so that he would not learn Islamic teachings or anything about being a Muslim. It was a really hard time for my family. So then my wife was smart enough to hand me the Quran, and she said, listen, read it. See if you find something you don't like. Now, I didn't tell her this at the time, but I've always been a big believer in know your enemy. And I had every intention to fight this, every intention to use every piece of information I could against her. And so I took the book. And I thought, okay, I'm going to learn about this religion. I'm going to figure out exactly how to fight this, because I do not want my son to be Muslim. Ain't no way, no how. So I started reading the book. And believe it or not, I didn't find much that I didn't like, but I was still very skeptical. And so I really thought about it. I really thought about it, and I read the family values. I read the things in it about being a good person and giving charity. And I thought, okay, all right, this maybe I was lied to. Maybe America, and at least the Western society, lied to me a little bit about Islam. Maybe this isn't quite what they told me it was. Maybe it's not that bad, but I still wasn't sold. I thought about it and I was like, well, wait a minute. If I send my son out into the world, if I send him to school, if I let society tell him how to live, he'll have a bad day and they'll tell him that he needs to dye his hair blue and become a girl or an infinite gender or just something wacky that, look, if you thought I hated Islam, I hated that stuff even more. And so I thought about it and I was like, well, if he's Muslim, there ain't no way that's going to happen. If he's not Muslim, it could happen. And so I thought about it and I was like, trans-Muslim, 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 Muslim. So I called my wife up and I said, listen, you can teach him Islam. And she was absolutely shocked. But I was making an executive decision as a father, in my mind at the time, the lesser of two evils. Now, at this point, I really needed to understand the religion that my son was going to be taught. So I actually picked up the Quran and I started reading it. I started going to the mosque, to these little events they would have, like the children's events and the bazaars and whatnot. And I noticed that there was so much in the Quran that was amazing. There was so much about the religion that was literally like, if you were to take how the West paints a picture of Islam and you put it here, and then you put the actual religion of Islam here, they're like two completely different religions. And so I began to feel like I was lied to. Like I was told, hey, these people are bad, they believe in X, Y, Z, but in reality, they believed in A, B, C. And so I also noticed that when I went to the mosque, if there was a poor person, the imam would ask for money, you'd give him the money, and he would hand it to the poor person. And the mosques were just as nice as they needed to be to get the job done. When I remember going to because I grew up Christian, when I went to Christian churches, I remember the preachers having, sometimes a Rolls Royce, and they would just waste money on things. And look, no shade against Christians, but for me, it just seemed more genuine to give money and have them immediately hand it to a sister who needed it, who was struggling to feed her family, not put it in a collection jar and just hopefully maybe it'll make its way through the Rolls-Royce dealership, maybe to the poor people. And so I just noticed all these things and I thought, man, this is a beautiful religion. Now, at the time, I was dating a girl and it was going well, but for me, there was things that I did not agree with that were very Western. Things like, hanging out with other guys privately and, going on trips by yourself while hanging out with other men, and just things that I was not comfortable with. And it created conflict, and I ended the relationship. Now, I did not really realize this at the time, but that was a very Muslim thing to do. Like if you have a relationship with a man or you're married or something like that, you shouldn't be hanging out with other dudes. It's just like a basic. And I didn't need to be Muslim to feel that way. And so, that relationship ended and I was very depressed because now I had no one. I still was unmarried. I couldn't see my son all the time. And so my wife, my ex-wife at the time, noticed how depressed I was and she sent me a tafsir. And it was called Message for the Sick, because I was really, really depressed. And again, I reiterate, I had a lot of blessings in my life. Money, health, things like this, my parents both being alive, and I was still so miserable. And so she sent me this Message for the Sick. I read it, and when I read it, it just made everything come together for me. And I read it, and I said to her, we were actually in the car when I read it, and I said, take me to the masjid. I should have done this a lot sooner. And I went to the masjid, and I took Shahada. And everyone was around, and they were treating me like I was like a superstar, like I didn't even understand why at the time. It was, because all your sins are forgiven, everything is forgiven, and you're like the cleanest of them. And I had noticed before that the Muslims were the nicest people I had ever met, but now I really saw it, and they were so welcoming, and it was an amazing experience. And it felt like all this weight, all these horrible things I had done, all these sins and these things that were not what I believed myself to be as a person, outside of what I wanted my character to be, all these things weighing me down that I felt horrible about and that I felt like I could never, ever make up for, were all gone. And I made a promise that day that I would stick to not committing major haram, meaning like riba, zina, all the major stuff. And I would obviously try my best for the minor. And I would just try to keep that slate as clean as humanly possible, because that I never thought I would have that chance. I never thought I would have that chance to start clean again. And so That is how I changed my mind about Islam. Once I converted or reverted, I said to my wife soon after, I said, listen, you're Muslim, I'm Muslim. I'm a completely different person. You know, of all things that are permissible, that Allah hates the most is divorce. I said, let's get our family back together. And she agreed, and we did. And we got remarried. We went to the masjid, we did nikah, and then we spent some time in the U.S. We moved to Costa Rica for a couple years, and then we moved here to Dubai because we wanted to live in a Muslim country where we could easily find halal food and we could easily go and pray. And it's been an amazing life ever since. And I'll tell you, the hardest part of converting was my family. It was convincing my father not to hate me because, again, American, programmed to hate Muslims. My father is Christian, and let me tell you, he was not happy. It was not a good experience. And over time, I've been able to show him some things that make him question why he and others hate Islam so much. Because I really, truly don't blame him or anyone from America that hates Muslims. If you're watching this, I don't blame you. You were told to hate Muslims. You were programmed. Like, how could I possibly blame you? You grew up and you were taught these people are bad because of A, B, and C. And guess what? A, B, and C are just not true. And do not confuse Islam with Muslims. Just because someone says they're Muslim does not mean they follow Islam. Same thing with Christianity. Just because someone says they're Christian doesn't mean they follow Christianity. Christianity is a beautiful religion. It's peaceful. It's kind. So is Islam. Do not take what people do and make that the religion. And so I don't blame you. That was the hardest part. And then finally, what I believe now about Islam that I didn't believe before is simply that it is a religion of peace. And if you truly follow the religion, you will have peace. I never once have to worry about my wife going and having lunch with another man. Like, that's not even a conversation, you know? I don't have to worry about her going out and partying. I don't have to worry about any of the things I had to worry about with women in America. I don't have to worry about my life getting derailed with drugs and alcohol because, mashallah, I have not drank in 3 years. I cannot express enough how good your life will be when you follow the system. And Islam is a beautiful system for peace and happiness and just having your life together. Now, one more thing I forgot to mention. When I converted to Islam, it almost made me go broke, almost put me in the poorhouse. You see, the company that I had started in the United States was a business consulting company. And when you own a business in the United States, it's very easy to get loans and funding to get help with your business. So, mashallah, my company did amazing. I mean, we were making a lot of money. And most of that money, 60%, came from other businesses that would get a loan, pay us in full for our consulting, and then they would make payment. So it was riba. And so the day I became Muslim, I decided no more. And I did not accept these clients anymore. So imagine for a moment that 60% of the revenue, 60% of your income gone. You still have the same expenses. And honestly, we were running at profit margins that once we lost that 60%, we were pretty much break even. So any moment of struggle, I'm now costing myself money. And so it was very difficult. I didn't make money for 2 years. I broke even. Alhamdulillah, I had real estate and I had other things that did very well for me. And so I was okay. But my business almost went under. Now, thankfully, I was able to figure out a way to turn it around and make my company profitable again. But it's still not what it was because I cannot accept interest, and I won't accept interest. And so I decided to start some businesses over here in this region that help Muslims. Inshallah, those businesses will do well, and I won't have to rely on the American business, which is very difficult without riba. If you have any questions for me, leave it in the comments and I'll be happy to make a video. That's my story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.